on the Congo by Abram, Annika, Chloe, and Caroline. Next slide, please. Okay. The Belgian Congo, or the Congo Free State. Colonized as the Congo Free State in 1885, it was the personal colony of King Leopold II of Belgium. It was eventually turned over to the country of Belgium in 1908 due to the unspeakable atrocities that occurred there. However, they didn't stop, and Congo remained a colony of Belgium until 1960. It's estimated that around 10 million people died as a result of the forced labor in the Congo Free State. That was written by a group. It's not a source. For the first slide for 6.1, lift up those 25 millions of gentle and harmless blacks out of darkness and into the light of our blessed Redeemer, the light that streams from his holy word. Lift them up and dry their tears and fill their bruised hearts with joy, and gratitude lift them up, and make them comprehend that they were no longer outcast and forsaken, but our very brothers in Christ. That is from King Leopold's soliloquy. So that is a great example of what the imperialists thought of the people that they colonized. It's textbook white man's burden. They are talking about how these people, they're viewing them as less than, and wrong slide, how they need to be lifted up to their status, which is just, it's just plain wrong. And that's white man's burden. So that was written by an American, Mark Twain, but that is the general view that everyone took, including Belgium. This slide says, convert always the blacks by using the whip, keep their women in 9 months of submission to work freely for us, force them to pay you in sign of recognition, goats, chicken, or eggs, every time you visit their villages, and make sure that I will not say that, never become rich. Sing every day that it's impossible for the rich to enter heaven. Make them pay tax each week at Sunday Mass. Use the money supposed for the poor to build flourishing business centers. Institute a confessional system which allows you to be good detectives, denouncing any black that has a different consciousness contrary to that of the decision maker. Teach I will not say that, to forget their heroes and to adore only ours. Never present a chair to a black that comes to visit you. Don't give him more than one cigarette. Never invite him for dinner, even if he gives you a chicken every time you arrive at his house. So that is an excerpt from a letter that King Leopold wrote to Congo missionaries. He is describing how the Congolese people should be treated. He's justifying it by saying that they're different. And in this primary source, King Leopold is using white man's burden to justify the imperialism that is taking place in the Congo. He's using this to justify the horrific treatment that they gave the native people. Racial identity was the main factor for this, and it's demonstrating the social Darwinism that was present.
The excerpt is a journal entry written by a European missionary who photographed and exposed some of the abuses by King Leopold II's enforcers, who basically really did really bad things to the Congolese rubber workers. It talks about how they killed children and mutilated them and even cannibalized them. Racial identity was a big factor in the normalization of the abuse, mutilation, and torture of Congolese civilians who harvested the rubber. And the social Darwinism insinuated the race theory that white people were inherently better than black people, and therefore the Belgians were able to force the Congolese into labor and controlled and imperialized them. Nassau was shown such cruelty that was not happening to workers in Europe, America, or any other white working class.
Of the Congo Free State, which became the Belgian Congo in 1908. And it's, as you can see, the Congo Free State is much bigger than Belgium itself. And it was completely taken over in a relatively short time. And explorations into the area of the Congo and on the Congo River started by Henry Morton Stanley, and King Leopold took an interest in that, and then in 1885 the Congo Free State became his private and the Belgian Congo was direct rule, and it was based off the colonial trinity of state, missionary, and private companies.
Appointed. The soldiers took a number of prisoners, usually women and children, in the refractory village. These were kept until they were exchanged for the men who could be used as carriers. The second source is a primary source and is a resistance song that was heard in 1888 in resistance to the Europeans. It was a response to the system of recruiting the indigenous people to the Congo army, and they were clearly not very happy about it. It was a response to the harsh work that the native people were put to, but although they were thinking of many ways to revolt, they never actually ended up revolting. The Congolese national movement, which we represent at this great conference, is a political movement founded on October 5th, 1958. This date marks a decisive step for the Congolese people as they move toward emancipation. I am happy to say that the birth of our movement was warmly received by the people for this reason. The fundamental aim of our movement is to free the Congolese people from the colonialist regime and earn their independence. We base our action on the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Man. This was a speech made by Patrice Lumumba at the Assembly of African Peoples in 1958. 2 years later, after Congo was emancipated and gained its independence, he'd become the Prime Minister of Congo. They were fighting for their independence, and it was primarily due because they weren't happy with the treatment they were given.
We cannot endure that our women and children are taken away and dealt with by white savages. We shall make war. We know that we shall die. We want to die. We want to die. This was a Congolese fight song that came from King Leopold's Ghost, which was a book, and the book was written in 1998. And it was a song from the time that the Congo was under control of King Leopold and the Europeans, and it was a form of resistance against the Europeans that were there because they were being treated horribly, and they were being their hands were being cut off, and they hated the Europeans and wanted them to leave, and they began to want to die because of the treatment they were getting.
50,000 people hiding for weeks in the forest without food or shelter, seeking refuge from the white Belgian officers and their native soldiers. This is a primary source from a missionary in the Congo named W.M. Morrison, and it documents how native people were hiding in the forest as in resistance to the white Belgians who were there, and because it was very hard for them to resist in other more violent ways, so they would just hide. The profits made by the Bear Company, which is a rubber company from 1892 to 1903, and rubber was the main export of the Congo, the main reason why Leopold and the Belgians were there. And the line is the estimated profits for the years with no data, and there's a general upward trend showing that the Belgian Congo, the Belgians profited heavily from their Congo colony.
Graph showing the imports and exports of the Congo Free State from 1887 until 1903, which is shortly before it was turned over to the Belgian government. So you can see that generally the exports are much, much higher than the imports, these gray bars being the balance or the overall deficit between the two. Generally, based on the idea of mercantilism that many of the imperialist countries shared at this time, you're going to want to have your exports as high as can be while having your imports as low as can be. You want to maintain the favorable balance of trade if you're the colonizing country, in which case Belgium, which they were absolutely doing, towards about 1898, it starts to just skyrocket while the imports are holding fairly steady. because when you don't have to spend on humanitarian supplies, you can keep your imports low. So, as you can see, the money and the exports are just going way, way up from the rubber that's being exported, while the imports are staying relatively the same. But this is the textbook idea of mercantilism that you're looking for in a colonialist country. This is a GDP estimate for the years between 1820 and 1998. Belgium gets control of the Congo Free State in 1908, which would fall right in between this 1870 and 1913 block. Oops, I've gone to the next slide. So, you can see the Belgium line here goes from 13,746 to 32,347, which is a massive increase in this one jump here. It more than doubles, which it does not do for the next block. So you can see that the Belgian Congo has had a tremendous impact on the overall growth of the country's GDP in this time, which again is the mercantilism ideals that you're looking for in a colonialist country, imperialist. Here is the corresponding GDP of the African nations, specifically Congo, what we're looking for right here, which goes from the 1913, it does not have statistics for the 1913, and neither does it have anything before then, which that's showing you that they didn't really have any economy at all. They were not a global economy because everything they were importing and exporting was either controlled by King Leopold or the country of Belgium. It's not until 1960, until they gain their independence. You can still see the numbers for 1950, but it's pitiful. There's not much at all. Just 990, which is very low. So the country of Belgium does not gain its independence until 1960, and as such, their GDP does not start to take off until around that time.
In this source, it's talking about how in the Berlin conference, where the European countries divided Africa among them, apparently freedom of trade was guaranteed to the African countries. So citizens of all nations were granted the right to live in the Congo Free State and trade with the native peoples. And then the native people could offer their wares, the products of their land, in the free markets of the world. But then it goes on to say that freedom of trade was, quote-unquote, throttled in the Congo Free State. So trade was balanced in heavy favor of Belgium, and the right of the natives to trade with the world, the mother country, and the world was being trampled on. And the text, after this quotation, the text goes on to say that traders, both native and foreign, were being displaced by large private companies who mostly dealt with rubber.
Colony were rubber and ivory. Then, after 1890, European demand for rubber skyrocketed with the invention of the bicycle. King Leopold's devious planning paid off. Historians estimate that the king received profits from the Congo of over $1.1 billion. As the profits mounted, Leopold bought mansions in Belgium and the French Riviera. The text and picture provide evidence of the wild profits that Belgium, and more specifically King Leopold, were receiving. The money that was being made off of that rubber trade was not being used by the citizens of Congo, but instead by King Leopold II, who was using his money for expensive goods like the mansion above.
There is a primary source that shows the causes for the reasons that the Belgian people went to the Congo. It's an example of the White Sisters, which were a group of nuns that were there in the Congo to convert the native people to Catholicism. And they mainly converted the young children and women, as seen in the picture above. And the European women went there to teach the children Catholicism. And the nuns also went to help with the maternal needs in the village. So in the picture, you can see all the native indigenous people there that were being converted by the few white nuns in the top of the photo. Oops, wrong slide. Okay, so this is an excerpt from a text, and it says the sister orders of the Catholic missionaries, like the White Sisters, tended to the village women's maternal needs often toured with mining representatives to pick up pregnant women from the surrounding villages and bring them to the maternity wards for physical checkup and care. The system was very well organized. The mine donated food and supplies to the maternity hospital. European women were also called in to play an active part in the programs. Thus, these programs enabled the colonial presence of European women. This is a secondary source from a book that was written about it. And the White Sisters were there to spread Christianity along with treating these maternal needs of the people. They helped give birth to the babies. And it was a cause for all of the European women to go there, and it also led to other people going too, like the white fathers who were the missionaries that were men who converted people too, but they didn't help with maternal needs. And yeah, it shows the effects of migration to the Congo. Oops. Okay, this is a picture. It's a primary source, and it's a missionary hut that was built in the Congo, in Kasongo, the Congo, which was a city. It wasn't not city, the place it was in the Congo. And it was the picture was from 1920 to 1940, which was when the Congo was ruled by Belgium. And it shows the migration of the European women from Belgium to help spread their religion in the Congo, and it shows the effects of the migration there and why they went. They also helped with the maternal needs. Okay. This slide is a primary source, and it shows the effects of the nuns there, and they converted the babies there, and those are the babies that they helped give birth to in the native village there. And it shows the effects of all the nuns traveling there and the missionaries that went.
This map shows that as states industrialized, they expanded overseas empires and established new colonies and transoceanic relationships. And as Belgium industrialized, they expanded into the Congo, and this is evidenced by this map, which is made in French. It's French, and it was made by a Belgian man named Léon Demour.
Sources for our project. There is 3 slides, and it has a source for everything. Some of the sources are already on the slides, though. Okay, thanks for watching our video.
Thanks for watching, guys. Remember to like and subscribe.